Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about volunteering, solidarity, and democracy in schools in Sweden, the EU, and beyond here today. Like Elizabeth said, my name is Anna-Karin Eriksson, and I'm a lecturer in politics at Dalarna University in Sweden. And the organization that I used to volunteer in is called Peace Quest. We organize opportunities for young people to practice conflict management in classroom settings. Visiting schools, we offer workshops that aim to make students think apart from conventional ways of approaching difficult questions. To talk about how volunteering might bring solidarity into classrooms in schools all over Europe and beyond, in this webinar, I will address the shortcomings of the democratic practices that are built into the very fabric of the school system in Sweden in this area of populism. I will also spend some time examining central distinctions to consider when thinking about solidarity. And I think that what I have to say will connect to what Manuela and Mehdi shared in the chat in terms of their associations to solidarity. And finally, I will discuss some possibilities and pitfalls of volunteering in schools. And this I will do by responding to the questions that you asked when you registered for this webinar. Swedish schools are by no means unique for their dual division of a knowledge mission, which entails imparting knowledge and skills, and a fostering mission, which entails supporting students' personal development and democratic values. The EU's overarching goal for education, after all, stress values like social cohesion and human rights. Something that, however, makes Sweden stand out is this clear distinction of the two as essentially different missions for schools to accomplish. In Sweden, it is stipulated by law that students are not only to learn about democracy, but also through democracy. And this requires teachers to provide classroom environments where students develop to become democratic citizens. This opens up avenues for thinking about democracy as a core value and a practice. To begin with the role of schooling in a democracy, students learning about democracy is seldom controversial. Learning about democracies is in general just approached in the same way as learning about other subjects. Learning through democracy is, however, an entirely different issue. Research about democracy in schools shows that no matter how ambitious we are in our interventions as teachers and educators, what students bring with them into the classroom matters far more for the kinds of attitudes towards democracy that they take in their lives than anything that we accomplish through education. In this regard, interventions aimed to engage students' heads are particularly prone to fail. To teach values in an impactful way requires engagement beyond dogmatic thinking. It requires unlearning, for example, racism, by hands-on engagement under desegregated circumstances. For example, 11 young male supporters of the far right reported feeling angry at the way their anti-racist education and diversity awareness training was delivered because it failed to listen and engage with them in a respectful manner. By instead allowing individuals to develop independent leadership skills in relation to their thinking in a non-prescriptive way, they began questioning themselves and others about the different kinds of knowledge they came across. In relation to democracy as a practice, the value of respectful, listening types of interaction and trust building have all been demonstrated elements of success. School education striving towards unlearning bias needs to not only employ interactive methods, but to base its very curriculum on it. At stake here are two diametrically opposed approaches to how we facilitate students' reflections about their attitudes towards value-based attitudes and behavior. One that assumes that the foundation of value-based knowledge needs to be left open for negotiation is the very condition for democratic deliberation. And another one that advocates for deciding what this ground should be a priori. By foundation, I'm not considering the content of the value-based knowledge, but the assumption that there is such a thing as a foundation that is implicitly brought up as a backdrop for a school's value-based work. More specifically, I here refer to how the Christian Democrats in Sweden made a populist move to establish Christian ethics as a foundation upon which all schools' value-based work is supposed to emanate from. Profiting from evolving populism, the Christian Democrats, against the threat of dissolving the then government, managed to get Christian ethics written into the national curriculum in Sweden in 1994. And the debate over it has been absent ever since, even though the left and the Social Democrats both made reservations at the time. Why then am I bringing this history from 1994 up in a web webinar like this? Because it concerns majority society's relation to minority students. And this is a core issue, of course, for democracy. It also connects closely to the populism that currently defines national policy in many EU countries and beyond. Solidarity in this light must entail challenging the dubious establishment of majority culture as the foundation upon which schools' value-based education is bound to rely. What makes it even trickier in the Swedish context is that Christian ethics are written into the national curriculum in the same clause as a requirement that schools are to be non-confessional, that is, non-religious. And key to this is the curriculum's paradox of othering based on both religion and religiosity. And by religion, I here mean Christianity, and by religiosity, I mean the approach that is taken towards the role that religion plays in people's life. Religion is here at once made into a public concern, but limited to Christianity, and condemned from the public as a private concern based on secularism and enlightenment. What these two paradigms accomplish when they are made to work together is to effectively exclude all other religions than Christianity from view, and to combining this with the secularism that makes Christianity an allegedly irreligious backdrop. This effectively refuses minority students' experiences of both religion and religiosity a place in the majority culture. By demanding minority students to become part of the majority society through a stepwise process of assimilation, this Protestant majority perspective traps minority students between their families and their schools' demand. While Sweden is not alone being strongly influenced by the idea of secularism as a common ground for schools to operate from, and to focus on imparting a shared cultural foundation, the country's explicit articulation and equally strong focus on the fostering mission through folk education and democratic values does, however, stand out in the EU. To draw out the implications of this Protestant secularism for concrete classroom situations, after the 7th of October 2023, a media survey was conducted by Swedish National Television, in which 16 out of 37 schools in Sweden's second-largest city of Gothenburg reported increased anxiety levels in their school environments because of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Reports about the school situation in Stockholm, Sweden's capital city, from 2022, and Malmö, Sweden's third-largest city, from 2021, both conclude that the situation was tense already before the onset of the Israel-Hamas war. The problem, as stated in these reports, is that schools are at once declaring themselves to be neutral, while at the same time invoking the majority Protestant way of religion as its approach towards religion and religiosity. What then does volunteering have to do with all this? Well, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are widespread in majority society. Meanwhile, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia count among the subjects that teachers find difficult to grapple with and have histories of being insufficiently addressed and under-prioritized in schools. With assimilation into the majority culture as a baseline for schools' democracy work, effectively promoting a view of equity that centers on inclusion from the outside into the majority, as opposed to fostering coexistence based on mutuality. This approach brings minority students into majority culture as opposed to envisioning democracy work as a two-way process. The problem here is that anti-Semitism has a history of being associated with historic events, rather than to being seen as an everyday practice. During the post-war period, anti-Semitism largely came to be associated with the Holocaust, rather than with everyday encounters, portraying this form of racism as an extreme, marginal expression, thus making everyday prejudices and attitudes invisible. Meanwhile, Islamophobia until recently has remained under studies. What is needed in classrooms in the EU and beyond is an appreciation of difference as an asset in democracy work. By acknowledging the quality of democracy, to learn from each other's differences and deliberate, schools would be better equipped to both handling current issues like the Israel-Hamas war and make sure students learn through practices that are truly democratic. Solidarity, in the sense of the term, might be envisioned as a way of supporting minority students. It might also be envisioned as a way of upholding democracy. Democracy in Sweden, Europe, and beyond needs volunteering to being restored by inducing solidarity. One thing that is tricky with solidarity, however, is that it sometimes becomes entangled in a version of unity that builds on identitarian homogeneity and thereby ends up excluding rather than including, with the same implications as the Christian foundation of schools' value-based work. To address this further, I will respond to some of the questions that you submitted when you signed up for this webinar. And the first question is, can solidarity and volunteering shape democracy? And my answer to this question is that by envisioning democracy as ruled by the people, we need to know what it means to rule and who is assumed to belong and not belong in the people. Questions about mobility are key to answering who is included and excluded, and the boundary mechanisms that regulate inclusion and exclusion in a political community are key to understanding what kind of rule is entailed in any vision of democracy. This means that there is no way that solidarity does not shape the way democracy takes form in our current times. Volunteering, to me, is what we do to make sure that solidarity remains a core feature of the democracy that we envision. What strategies, then, can enhance young people's participation in promoting and practicing solidarity across Europe? Well, to promote and to practice solidarity might or might not be compatible tasks, especially as this question revolves around encouraging others to engage in them. When we think about democracy, we sometimes tend to think in terms of a project that we want to undertake sometime in the future. For example, we want to foster democratic citizens through compulsory education. In this imaginary, the democratic citizens that are fostered in classrooms every day are not only supposed to be formed as democratic citizens once they grow up. This means that their everyday encounters with democracy throughout their school years end up going missing in our understanding of democracy. This connects to how anti-Semitism was approached during the post-war period. Once the war ended, anti-Semitism all of a sudden was turned into an historic matter that was assumed to already have taken place. Continuing to the third question, how is it possible to achieve peace and democracy considering wars, the occupation of countries, and the displacement of families? The very key to approaching peace and democracy is that these can never be achieved states if they are to mean anything truly meaningful. Peace is always a spectrum that ranges from the mere absence of war to socioeconomic equity for all. Democracy, likewise, is always work in progress. Because of this, we need to work on these processes here and now in our everyday encounters with our fellow beings. Finally, how can we encourage active participation in social, political, and environmental life? Well, people participate in social, political, and environmental life because it matters to them. Active participation stems from feelings of urgency in relation to the issues at stake and a sense of belonging among the other participants. To encourage active participation in social, political, and environmental life, we therefore need to frame the issues that we're dealing with in compelling ways and create an atmosphere where the people who we want to include feel welcome. Thank you very much for listening.
So hello to everybody. As you see from the slide, my name is Kai Alhanen, and I come from a small company called Dialogue Academy. We work in Finland mostly, but also quite a lot work is being done already internationally. And I'm here to tell you about democracy innovation. Hopefully, I think it's a democracy innovation that we have made during the pandemic, which is now a permanent model in Finland and has already been tried out in Latvia as well, where I have been working. So very shortly about my background and where I come from. Our company is quite small. There is 8 people working. We mostly do training and facilitation on dialogues and trainings on dialogue and facilitation of different dialogues. And we think that dialogue is a very specific skill that we need in democratic societies. And our main definition of dialogue is that dialogue is different from debating, for example, or negotiating, because dialogue is a form of conversation that aims at better understanding. It aims at better understanding of the topic that we are talking about, but also better understanding about other people, and also in the end, better understanding about ourselves. So it's a way of having a conversation that is focusing on learning. And we have been working for many, many years with the Finnish National Agency and with the Solidarity Corps also. So this model of national dialogues that I'm now explaining to you is already connected to the solidarity work that it's been done in the Finnish National Agency. And I think mostly the things that I want to connect and emphasize in my presentation about solidarity and national dialogues are the themes of inclusiveness and volunteering. So I'll come that in my final part of my presentation. So what are the national dialogues? As I already mentioned, national dialogues is a new approach that we developed during the pandemic. I will tell shortly about the background. But the main idea is to bring together the government, the civil society, and the citizens. And what it aims to do, it aims to create dialogical spaces. So places and moments and encounters where people can come together and discuss social issues in a constructive way and build trust in society, and also maintain hope during these very challenging times that we're living at the moment. But in addition to this, it also brings information to the government, which is involved in national dialogues, both in Finland and in Latvia. It brings information to the government that would not be available otherwise. And I think the most relevant aspect of this information is that the national dialogue is able to reach out to those groups of people who are not usually heard in our society otherwise. And I will explain later a little bit how is that possible. And in the end, it aims to strengthen the social inclusion in our societies, and also strengthen cohesion. And in the end, it aims at giving the ability to different agents and actors in our society to change the society through dialogue. So the dialogue is there, obviously, in the core of all of this and makes these other good things happen. So what is our story? Well, very shortly, when the pandemic started, we have already started to work with some civil servants from the Finnish government. We had started to train them in dialogue, and they were quite enthusiastic about it. And suddenly, the whole crisis with the pandemic started, and we had the idea in Dialogue Academy that maybe we could suggest to the Finnish government that they would start to organize with us dialogues on a national level about people's experiences of life during the lockdown. We had trained, and lots of other organizations also had trained, several NGOs, several municipalities, several individual schools, and individual citizens to be dialogue facilitators. So we knew that there is a existing network of people who are actually capable of arranging and organizing dialogues. So we suggested to the Finnish government that if we invite everybody who wants to join to arrange their own lockdown dialogue, and obviously most of them were online because of the lockdown, and gather people from different parts of the society, from different walks of life, just to talk about two basic questions. What are they worried about, and what gives and brings them confidence in this situation? And we asked those organizers who organized and facilitated those dialogues to take notes, what people are saying, how they are responding to these questions, what happens in those dialogues, what are the experiences that people are having in the crisis situation, and deliver those notes without names of the participants to us. And we will write public reports and summaries of these experiences. And the government was committed of using this information in dealing with the pandemic. And during those 2 years of the pandemic, we had almost 300 dialogues in Finland, and 111 organizers participate in organizing dialogues. And we had more than 2,000 people participating in those. And this approach was so inspiring for all of us who were involved. So we decided with the Finnish government that we will make it a permanent model. So now, since the beginning of 2022, it has been a permanent model in Finland. So every year we have 2 national dialogues with different topics. And so far we have had over 900 dialogues on various topics so far. We had a topic on the dialogues about immigration, about the ecological problems of nature, and then we had a kind of a general dialogue about the topic of trust and security. And our topic, national dialogue of this autumn, was on the topic, what brings us together? And the whole national dialogue is organized or coordinated with this small operative core group, which involves a couple of ministries from the Finnish government, representatives from the civil society, and our company that provides dialogue expertise to the core group. But we all arrange our own dialogues, but obviously all those hundreds and hundreds of dialogues are organized by other actors, mostly NGOs, but we also have companies involved. We have municipalities and different actors in municipalities like schools and libraries and museums. Several ministries also arrange their own dialogues. Universities arrange their own dialogues. But also we have individual citizens who invite people to their home or some nice place, and they are also organizing dialogues. So it's an ongoing process now. It's a permanent model. And I have worked a lot in Latvia also. So the Latvian government initiated their own national dialogue in collaboration with civil society in 2023 on the topic of trust. So it's been also encouraging to see that this is possible not only in Finland, but it can also happen in other countries. So we'll hope that more countries will follow and we can all learn together more about this way of strengthening democracy. When we are organizing and arranging and coordinating the national dialogues, we follow certain very important principles. We aim at completely openness and transparency. So it's open for everybody to join. It's quite easy to join as a participant in the dialogue, but as I mentioned, everybody can also be the organizer of the dialogue and invite other peoples to join in. And all the principles, how you can join and what are you supposed to do there and what is required is very transparent and same for everybody. And no single party dictates the agenda of what is discussed. So the government for example, doesn't decide what is the topic of the dialogue. We do it together openly in a process that helps us to find the next topic for our national dialogues. Our work is also based on trust and equality, meaning that we provide, for example, materials and guidelines for the people who organize the dialogues, but we are not controlling what they're doing. We trust them to do the work that they know the best. And we hope that this kind of a trust, the chain of trust is from us from the core group all the way to the individual participants and all the way the back, that the individuals trust that we take good care of the information and materials that they provide us from the dialogues. And it's based on the idea of joint ownership, that everybody owns a little part of the whole entity of the national dialogues. It's required for anybody who wants to join and make their own dialogue on the topic that we have chosen. Like this autumn, the topic was what brings us together. We provide these ground rules. So what we are actually just asking people is that try to keep the discussion as a dialogue. Don't make it into a debate. Don't make it into any other way, like a negotiation or something that, for example, would aim at consensus. You don't need to agree in the end. You just need to focus on learning and understanding. And these are the ground rules that we encourage people to explain in the beginning of each dialogue. So encourage everybody to listen to each other, to relate what other people are saying, talk from their own experience, talk directly and ask from other people, be present and respect, and then also search for new perspectives and try to bring together the bigger picture in the end that starts to emerge, hopefully, from the dialogue. So this is the main guideline that we encourage people to use when they invite others to come to dialogues. And we then obviously provide lots of other support material, but we don't require anybody to use them. It's there only for their support, and it's there available on our website. If anybody wants to join, they can go to the website and find all the materials there. So how do I connect this with solidarity? Well, first of all, I want to emphasize that most of the dialogues that are arranged are based on a voluntary basis. For example, all the individual citizens who want to join in national dialogues and arrange their own national dialogue, they are doing it as volunteers. But also, I think most of the NGOs, for example, that are the backbone of our network of organizers, I think we have like more than 100 NGOs at the moment who are committed of arranging national dialogues every year. They are also doing it as part of, most of it is done part of their voluntary work. But there's a more specific role also for the Solidarity Corps, because this autumn we had a theme, what brings us together. So we invited Solidarity Project to take a part. And we, together with Dialogue Academy and the National Agency, we arranged the Solidarity Project dialogue as part of the national dialogues, and we actually also were able to invite the Finnish Minister of Youth to participate in that discussion. And we had 18 young people who were arranging their own solidarity project, and they were telling about their experiences. And I've just finished writing the first version of the report that I'm delivering for the National Agency, because these dialogues will be used as part of developing the work for the Solidarity Corps in Finland. And I just want to end up with these two quotes that I think were wonderful from those dialogues, because we are obviously asked them to share about their experiences of arranging a Solidarity Project. And one of the participants said that the reason why it's so good to have Solidarity Project is that young people are very creative. They have the perspective on their lives. They have new ideas. So I think this somehow brings us to the core of Solidarity Projects. And the second one was the very moving thing that one participant said, that all the people who are struggling would need somebody to invite them to join into something. And I think the National Dialogues is trying to increase solidarity in the Finnish society by inviting especially those people who are struggling to have their voices heard, even up to the Finnish government. Thank you.